Welcome to the Florence Foodies Podcast, a place for the community to gather and share the stories, voices, and experiences that make Florence feel like home. To support this podcast and the Florence Foodies platform as a whole, click the Support This Podcast link found in the description.
I'm interested, what part of the country are you from, being here in our area here in Darlington, and also specifically, what's your story and relationship to NASCAR?
Well, I'm a Southern boy at heart. I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, born and raised there, had family that lived just down the road from us, and then some other part of my family were in North Carolina and Georgia. So I spent a lot of my youth in the Southeast part of the country, and really my NASCAR journey was started when I was about 10 years old, driving back and forth from Mississippi to visit my grandparents and other family in the Atlanta area. We would always drive right by Talladega Superspeedway on I-20. And my mom and her family had followed NASCAR when she was a kid a little bit. And so, you know, there's some of the bigger races we would catch on TV, I remember as a kid. And then about my 10th birthday, we got tickets to go to our first Talladega race, and that was in 1993. First race we ever went to, I'll never forget, taught me an important lesson about going to a NASCAR event. You always stay till the checkered flag. So in that race, towards the end, there was some rain threatening, and we thought, They threw to caution with about 10 laps to go. That time, NASCAR didn't have overtime or any of these things. So we thought, well, it's just going to end under caution. We're going to get a head start getting out of there. So we left, walked about a mile back to our car. And next thing you know, we get to the car, turn on the radio, and they had red flagged the race. It was a short shower that passed through. They were able to get the track dry, and we missed one of the most infamous crashes at Talladega when Rusty Wallace went flipping down the front stretch. So thankfully Rusty was okay, but it just taught us that you always have to stay until you hit the checkered flag. But from there on, we went to a race at Talladega every year. We went to either the May race or at that time it was October. In July, they switched up a little bit, but through my freshman year of college, we went. The last race I went to as a fan at Talladega was 2000 when Dale Earnhardt came from about 17th place with 3 or 4 laps to win that race. He was my favorite driver growing up, and so that was really cool before his untimely passing at Daytona the following February. And I remember being in my dorm room watching that race. And from there, you know, like all college kids, you get into different things, interests, and I've still followed the sport casually, but I decided to pursue a master's degree in sports. I really wanted to work in sports. So I moved to South Florida after I finished my degree at Mississippi State University. And from there, I started working in college sports for a little while. My wife, Lauren, she actually interned at Homestead Miami Speedway while I was in graduate school. So that reconnected a little bit to NASCAR. And then for about the first 5 or 6 years of my career, I worked in tennis events and golf events, doing ticketing, customer service, business development. And about 2011, we relocated from South Florida to the Atlanta area, still working for the same company. And then about a year later, I started looking at opportunities, and I came across a position at Talladega Superspeedway. And it was for a director of ticketing, which fit my background. So in 2012, summer of 2012, I joined the team at Talladega, and that kind of started my career within the sport and within the track part of the business. I spent 4.5 years at Talladega. Great time, learned a lot. It was really cool to go back and work at a track where you went and had your first experience as a fan. And then from there, went down to Daytona in 2017, had the opportunity to expand my role and my scope a little bit, worked there for 6 years. Worked with a lot of great people. The schedule at Daytona is super busy. There's always something going on, whether it's NASCAR, other forms of motorsports, IMSA, motorcycle racing, club cars, you name it, concerts and festivals. So I got a great opportunity to really just experience so many different ways a track can be used. And And then in late 2022, an opportunity presented itself for me to come here to Darlington and work with Kerry Tharp. So I took that opportunity, thought it'd be great to get another track. Darlington felt a lot like Talladega in a way from just the community feel. And it reminded me a lot of the area that I grew up in. So came here in January 2023. Kerry decided to step away and retire. And I was fortunate to be in a position to take the leadership role here at the beginning of 2024. So it's been a quick 2.5 years here at Darlington. I've learned so much, the history and tradition of this racetrack, what it means to this community. And it's, now when I look back, 13 years and counting here working in the sport.
Did you know coming into Darlington and working with Kerry that track president was on the horizon, or was that unknown?
I think we all have goals and dreams of, what we want to see in our career. And, I knew Kerry, I knew of him, kind of his career path. And while, there was no set in stone plan or anything, it was one of those where I felt like there'd be a good opportunity at some point that I could throw my name in the hat if he did decide to step away. So I think it was a lot of good timing. I've had some great mentors within the company that have helped guide me to different opportunities over the years, and I appreciate the impact they've had on me. And a number of them told me how special of a place that Darlington is, not only the racetrack, but the community and how it's embraced here. And certainly that's something that I've felt since I got here.
So what are the roles and responsibilities of a track president?
It's really an all-encompassing role, not to get too detailed or in the weeds about how our business works, but we're kind of a regionally operated track model. So we share a lot of our employment, or our employees, our staff, our team, share responsibilities across multiple tracks. So we're in the Mid-Atlantic region, which is Martinsville Speedway, Richmond Raceway, Darlington, and now Bowman Gray Stadium a little bit as well. So a lot of our team members actually work on all three of those tracks in some form or fashion. So we have a team here full-time of about 13 that work here at Darlington. Some of those help those other tracks, and some of them are just based here. So my role is really to help guide that collective team in all facets of our business, whether that's planning, sales and marketing, ticket sales obviously is a big piece of it. Keeping this facility maintained year-round, 75 years that we're celebrating this year. So it's an older facility. We got about 300 acres here that we take care of on a year-round basis. So it's really kind of having a little bit of my hand in all parts of the business, making sure first and foremost that we are putting on the best fan experience we can for our two NASCAR events, one in the spring, one in every Labor Day with the Cookout Southern 500, which is coming up next month. And then, throughout the year, we host various events here, whether they're community focused, we do some charitable events, and we're working on building out that schedule of other events, in the years to come so that we utilize the track a little more.
So immediately with you mentioning Talladega and kind of comparing the community, which I've only ever driven by Talladega. I've never would love to go to a race out there. Talladega, Atlanta, Charlotte, Daytona. That's probably my short list of tracks I have not been to that I would enjoy going to all of those. But either way, I could see how there could be similarity. Obviously, the track's massively different, pun intended, but different experience from that standpoint. But just community-wise and the history, Talladega, Darlington, we could talk so much about the history of the sport and this track here, any track. But really, something I was interested to discuss with you, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, is more of the evolution of the sport. So to give you just some background for me sitting here, because I think I can be a good stand-in for a demographic. I grew up, born late 80s, and so I grew up with 90s NASCAR. And so, every weekend we're either watching on television or listening on the radio to every race. And that's my introduction to the sport is Rusty Wallace and Dale. I grew up a Bill Elliott fan. He's got a car back here in the back of the museum. And so that really is my point of reference to starting to be a NASCAR fan. And then around 2011, for various reasons, I kind of detracted from the sport. And then in preparation for some content, we came to the 500 last year, and I told you in preparation for that, we did some content, and I wanted to kind of get up to speed a little bit. So I started watching races midway through the season last year, just so when I came to the track, I could be oriented to who some of these guys were, because after a decade plus of being away, there's a lot of people I didn't recognize. And that kind of pulled me back in. But being somebody that's oriented from a completely different time period of the sport, there's things I really don't understand. And I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what NASCAR is trying to do at this point in time is, reach, you're always trying to reach a new audience and expand, but then also connect with an older audience, because it's kind of a different era in this sport. And well, I'll mention something about other sports in a moment that I was thinking about on the way over here, because really we've seen the same thing in football, but kind of maybe NASCAR gets held to a different standard, a double standard. Maybe it shouldn't. Regardless of how certain systems are in place, and we'll talk about some of them here in a moment, the playoffs, things like that, really the essence of NASCAR itself is still what makes the sport great, and that's still what's in place. These guys are getting behind the wheel of machines with a lot of horsepower, and they're racing as hard as they can to get a victory. And that's really what just kind of has come full circle for me. So now it's kind of, and this leads into, I say all that to lead into what I want to ask you. Getting to that place, getting over maybe that hurdle, if you will, has me to where now my mind's open and I want to just understand, okay, well, how has the sport changed from what I was accustomed to, and why are the things that are in place now? What do they bring to the table?
Yeah, so I think this question could probably encompass a lot of things, and our stories, sure, while the timing are a little different, I think they're aligned in a way as well, because I grew up same kind of as you, that mid to late 90s, early 2000s was really the time I was, watching the sport consistently. We had a different point system. The way the TV schedule operated, all of those things were different. And like any business, NASCAR has to evolve and continue to grow and change with everything that changes around us. So we'll start with kind of the point system. So for a long time, season-long points, the Winston Cup before Nextel came into the sport as the entitlement sponsor in the early 2000s, which was then followed by Sprint. But really, when that shift happened, the change in the point system kind of came along with it. And the first evolution was the regular season then set what was the time called the chase for the Nextel Cup. And it was the last 10 races of the year, the top 10 drivers in points. And it was a little bit more of a simplified format than what we have now. But what we've seen since maybe 2003, 2004 is that evolution has evolved to now where we have the playoffs, still 10 drivers, but now it's the top 16. We do eliminations after every 3 races in those last 10. And I think, the overall reason behind all these changes is to try and spur interest in the sport in the name of growing the sport. I haven't been a part of a lot of those decisions necessarily, but I understand the leadership team and how and why they've made those decisions. And I think one of the things that maybe gets out there sometimes is that NASCAR is doing this, to leave behind our legacy fan and just to go and grow. And I don't think that's an accurate assessment. I think we're certainly trying to grow the sport, because if we don't grow the sport, the sport doesn't survive. Maybe it survives the next 10 to 15 years, but what does the next 25 and 30 years look like? And what does it look like for my kids and then my kids' kids down the road? So I think the playoffs is an evolution of that, stage racing. I remember when I was a kid watching, and I don't know if you remember this at all, but there would be a lot of days where drivers would get out of the car and talk about, well, didn't win, but today was a really good points day. And I think over time that kind of became a phrase that turned some fans into thinking, well, are they really trying to go out here and win every race, or are they just trying to get the best points day they could? And not to say that was always the wrong approach, but I think it was just one of those pieces of the puzzle that led to, well, how can we encourage the drivers, and not that they weren't racing hard, but can we incentivize them with additional points, with additional payouts throughout the race? And so the stage racing came out. So now we have natural cautions built into the races. Points are paid out for the championship race for the first 10 positions at those stage breaks, and then the most points are paid at the end still. Usually stage 2 out of the 3 stages at about halfway through the race. So it creates some different strategy, and it's just one of the ways the sport has evolved. But I don't think that it was ever with the intention of leaving behind anyone. It was just about growth and evolution.
So just kind of advocating on the other side, just giving this some thought. One thing that I do distinctly remember, I remember being a kid. You know how kids think. Kids are maybe sometimes very logical because they just think the most obvious thing. But I remember being a kid, and we would obviously, in a NASCAR household, and there'd be like 10 races left on the schedule, and Jeff Gordon's already sewed up the championship. But he could sit out the next month and a half or 2 months, and he's going to win the title. And I remember thinking, like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, what? Because when you're a kid, it's win or nothing. You don't understand points day. You don't get that. Yeah. And I guess, from that standpoint, just kind of I'm always trying to understand both sides of a thing. I think that's a good, healthy practice. And from that standpoint, it makes sense to try to create some kind of parity, because that used to happen, especially somebody like Jeff for a stretch there. I mean, it could be sewed up early. And another thing that I thought about too, and I would say this to perhaps that demographic that I kind of come out of, even though I'm probably on the younger side of that group, is I thought about football. So I'm a big football fan, and I know a lot of you are. We're in the South. Mm-hmm. And there's things about the game of football, specifically at the NFL level, that I don't like. The way the game's played. There's like the new kickoff system. I don't like it. And I don't like how pass interference is called these days. I don't like the hands to the head on the quarterbacks, because some of it's completely incidental. There's nothing you can do about it. And yes, I'm ranting now, but I mean, you got these 275-pound, defensive linemen rushing in, doing his job to get to the quarterback. And if his arm's up to try to bat a ball down and play good defense, and his elbow accidentally, or incidentally, I guess I should say, hits the quarterback's head, it doesn't even cause an injury. It wouldn't cause an injury. It wasn't malicious or intentional. That, in my mind, and that can change a game. So I don't like those things, but it in no way stops me from watching football. I'm still a big football fan because I love the sport. And so you just kind of accept that this rule's in place. I understand why it's there as player safety in that case. And so it's designed to keep the sport functioning and efficient. And that's why I said that earlier. Just kind of thinking through that, I was like, maybe a lot of people have placed a double standard on NASCAR that's unfair in some of these areas, and myself included on some of that possibly. So like I said, that's kind of opened me up. But really, I will say this, and the last thing I'll say to that point, and then we can kind of shift over, is coming to the track last year, and it had been a while since I'd been in a race. It's been, like I said, about 8 or 9 years. But, pun intended, I guess, but that's really where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. And you that's always the way it was. I always told people, I said, if you don't understand, a lot of people don't understand NASCAR. They don't get it. They don't understand the intricacies and the nuance of the engineering that has to go on with these engines and that whole aspect of the sport. That opens a whole nother door of revelation. And once you start to understand that and you realize how competitive and precise that part of the sport is, you start to understand it a lot more. But to the completely just absent viewer that just sees it on TV that never understood, they just see the cars going around the track. I'm like, step one is just get out there and go to a race. And that will be a very mind-opening experience. And so that's really where I settled. And I'm glad that it worked out that way. What started is really just getting some content last year to market our area and show something that's a big part of our area, which is what we're about to discuss, really actually kind of got me back interested in a sport that I loved and grew up with. It's a significant significant part of my childhood and my upbringing is the sport of NASCAR. So.
Well, you hit on a couple of things there that I think are key. And, first of all, we have great media partners. This year we started a new 7-year media rights deal. So our first part of our season was on Fox and FS1. Then we transitioned to Amazon Prime and TNT through the summer, and now we're about to go back to NBC. And the at-home viewing experience is phenomenal. You can't get better coverage, I think, than we've got from our partners. But also, there's nothing like being at a racetrack. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the things that you can't get coming through that TV screen. And it's not hard to convince people, but when you can convince them and they get out here, it starts to click. Even when we have opportunities to bring people out here to the track when we're not even racing, and we host, our track lap for charity events or other things out here, and we get people out there and they just see, we're a 1.36 mile track. So about middle size compared to a Daytona, Talladega, and obviously bigger than a Martinsville and Richmond. But just when you come into these facilities and how big they are, and then they see the banking and you start to understand a little bit. And if you get out here for a race, not saying you're going to go home and become a diehard fan and watch every week, but I think it gives people a different appreciation. And it's a big part of, our role and responsibility here at the track is to make sure when we host those events, it's everything going on the track, but then everything going off the track and the way we're tying in the community. And then I think one other thing I wanted to touch on that you brought up is, 4 or 5 years ago, the NASCAR schedule was pretty set, same tracks, generally the same basic schedule year over year. You kind of knew where things were going to start and end. And really, I give credit to our leadership team for being bold and taking a stance and saying, hey, for us to continue to grow, we've got to go and do some new things. So just in the last 5 years, we've built racetracks inside the LA Coliseum and started our season with the Clash. We've built a road course in downtown Chicago the last 3 years. We just announced we're going to take a race and race it on a Navy base next year in San Diego. We took the sport to Mexico City this year. And all of those things really are about trying to expose the sport to a new audience and grow. But at the same time, I think there's been a great balance in looking back at our history. We've reopened North Wilkesboro Speedway, which now hosts the All-Star race. Rockingham has come back, and we hosted a Xfinity and Truck Series ARCA weekend this year on Easter. There's countless examples, I think, of how NASCAR has, Bowman Gray bringing the Clash there. So to me, it's a great balance of trying to grow the sport, but also paying tribute and not forgetting where we came from. And I think that's probably the best way that we can go forward is coming to tracks like Darlington that have so much rich history and tradition, going to places like North Wilkesboro that, again, have that history and tradition, and then pushing the boundaries of what we're capable of as a sport to show we can take our sport to an area where there may not be a purpose-built track, and we can put on a phenomenal event that helps expose people that may not normally come to a track. And then that's how we grow the sport and continue to pay tribute to our history.
Yeah, and that's huge. And so that's a fantastic segue to this portion of our conversation. And I love the timing of us sitting down and doing this because we're right at the 75th anniversary of this track here in our area. And you talk about rich history. John Isgett was on this show last week, and we talked about this. You think about the Florence, Darlington area from a major sports standpoint, we don't have anything. And really on paper, there would seemingly be no reason for us to have anything when you think about the major sports in terms of, baseball and basketball and football. Even the Panthers didn't come along until, up the road there until the mid-'90s. But thankfully for NASCAR, which is one of the most major sports circuits in the United States historically, we did have this track built here 75 years ago. And so that's been huge for our area. And I remember what a big deal it was whenever we always carried these two races, and then we had one, and have the excitement whenever we're getting our second race back at Darlington. Our local market, because of what this track brings to our local area, is so important. So being track president now and considering all these things we've talked about, the history of NASCAR, the history of this specific track in this area, the evolution of NASCAR, all the different dynamics that are going on, what is your vision? What are some of the things that have come to your mind that when you look at Florence, Darlington County, that you want to capture and implement as you move forward in your tenure as track president?
Well, I think it certainly starts with paying tribute to the history and legacy. I think anyone you ask, especially if you go outside of this area, if you say Darlington, if someone recognizes Darlington, I would say 9 out of 10 times it's going to be because of this racetrack. And that's been built over 75 years of tradition. We're sitting right here in front of 2 stock cars of a hometown, homegrown hero, Cale Yarborough, 5-time Southern 500 champion, NASCAR champion, Hall of Famer. And you can go through this museum and see all these different stories. So that was one of the first things when I got here is just, we're fortunate to have this museum right here that helps preserve the history, not only of Darlington Raceway, but of the sport as a whole. It was the first stock car museum when it opened in 1965. We're celebrating the 60th year of this facility here. And so, to answer your question, it's about preserving the history, helping tell that story to new audiences. When you sit out in the Brazington grandstand, like what does that name have significance? Well, Harold Brazington was the original president, the founder, the builder of this track. It was his vision to bring a paved oval track for stock cars right here to his hometown. And that vision started in the 30s when he went to Indianapolis and he saw the open wheel cars. And it's telling all of those stories over the years of how this track has changed and grown, the leaders that have been here and had influence into helping the sport grow at the same time, helping this track grow. There's been movies filmed here. There's been so many ways that the track has helped shine a light on Darlington, on the PD region. You think about all the race fans that come in and stay. We don't have significant number of hotels here in Darlington, so a lot of our race fans, our race teams stay in Florence, they stay in Hartsville, they stay up the road in Cheraw, stay over in Myrtle Beach, pack a vacation in. So this track has had such a impact, and it's our responsibility to continue to do everything that we can to ensure that race fans understand the tradition and the history of the sport, that we're being good community partners on a year-round basis. We try to get out and take our show on the road, so to speak. So, we do watch parties over in Florence. We'll do watch parties here in Darlington. We'll take our pace car and all the big festivals around this area where we show up. Yes, we want to market and promote the sport and the track, but it's also to show our support to all of those other events as well. And I think that's really what it comes down to for us is being a good community partner, because this area has given so much to the track over 75 years. And if it weren't for the local support that we have here, the track may not have even survived for 75 years. So.
Yeah, and it's definitely a well-loved facility. I tell people, just kind of going back to people not familiar with the sport, but race fans really are some of the best sports fans that there are. You come to a race, people are just glad to see you, glad that you're there. That's always been my experience. And I don't know if I'm going to assume, maybe I'm ignorant to something, there's something I don't know, but there's a handful of RVs that are already parked back here behind the track, and we're 4 weeks away from the 500. I'm assuming that they're already out tailgating and getting ready for the race. I guess they are, but there's about 6 or 7 of them over there. I saw that coming in. So the excitement is always there in our community for the race really as a whole when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I think there's a number of private campgrounds around that, open their doors, and we love and embrace the fact that we've got great neighbors right around us that, open their doors to our campers as well. And, we'll open up our campgrounds on Tuesday of race week. So it's a week-long tailgate. People come from all 50 states, multiple countries. You think about that. They're flying in, coming right here to Darlington, South Carolina, to the PD region twice a year, and we're proud of that. But, at the same time, a lot of our support comes within probably a 100-mile radius of here. So we love bringing folks in to experience that South Carolina hospitality and all that this area has to offer. But we're also really dependent on those that are local, continuing to support, buy tickets, come out and camp, spend time out here at our races, because if we do that, it's going to set us up for success. And, we kick off, like I said, Tuesday of race week. We'll have things going on every day of the week leading into the race weekend when cars hit the track. And that's the fun part. Our team spends months and months planning all of these things that go on, and then race week gets here. There's a buzz in the air. There's an excitement in the air. And then we get, honestly, it flies by, and we get to Monday, and we look back, and we're like, man, that was awesome.
Well, at least we get 2 weeks a year to do it.
That's
I know
right.
They're not both the 500, but so I'm going to ask you one more. I want to ask you a racing question, and then we'll kind of shift over. I know we're going to do a couple other things. So for those that don't know, and like I said, I get the privilege to kind of move people into this area. We just moved a family into Hartsville about a month ago, and they're right down the road here and very excited about being by a NASCAR track. And I don't think they've ever been to a race before. I don't remember. Anyways, very excited to be down by the track. So what people wouldn't know, and in that scenario may not know, is that when you talk about Darlington, every track's unique. Every track's a little bit different. Some are kind of similar. So Talladega and Daytona are similar. Darlington's a very unique track, and it's got these nicknames. So it's the track Too Tough to Tame. It's the Lady in Black. There's reasons for that. And, when we did the video last year for the 500, I got a shot of the wall right there in turns 3 and 4 prior to the green flag. Mm-hmm. And then I got another shot of the wall at the end of the race, and it did not look the same. So I'm just going to ask you in your words, what makes Darlington a challenging, I guess I should say, track for these drivers to drive?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors. One, let's start with the track surface. So it's an aging asphalt. You look at the surrounding makeup of the land here. It's sandy, got a little bit of shell from the beach. So all of that's mixed in to the pavement itself. So from a racing standpoint, that eats up tires pretty quick. It really puts the onus on the driver to know how to maximize the speed on a short run, but also for their cars to last until they can come in and change tires. The narrowness of the groove, of the racing groove, if you go out there right now, you'll see in the turns, there's a lot of paved area, but the actual area where they race is pretty narrow, about 2.5 lanes of racing surface. And then you add onto it, there is no other track that's shaped like Darlington Raceway. If you look at it overhead, it's an egg shape. The reason behind that, the short version is, when Mr. Brasington set out to build this track, he wanted a true oval. Well, there was a minnow pond from Mr. Ramsey right outside of what's now turn 4. And he told Mr. Brasington, you can build your racetrack, but you can't disturb my minnow pond. So he had to make that end of the track a little more narrow. So if you think about that as a race car and setting it up, you want your car to perform great in both ends. You got your straightaways, but really where you make speed and where you can make up ground is how well you can get through the turns. Well, if you got two completely different turns, how do you set your car up to perform? So all of those things go into making it such a tough track. You add in Labor Day weekend here is hot. We all know that. So 500 miles behind the wheel of a stock car with no air conditioning, it truly tests the mettle of the man behind the wheel, the woman behind the wheel. And then to make the most speed, one of the other things that we're famous for is Darlington stripe. You talked about it on the walls. You start the race, those walls are pretty clean, couple laps in, and then certainly by the end, you've got black marks all over, and that paint has been transferred to the side of those cars, because to make the fastest speed, you got to be right up against the wall. And inevitably, they step over that line just a little bit. They get themselves a Darlington stripe. And all of those factors create one of the toughest tracks on the circuit, and it's why it means so much for drivers to win here. Not only the history and tradition and the names that have won here before, but just they know when they've come here and they've won, they've earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can go on YouTube or the internet, wherever, and hear the drivers talk about the experience of Darlington. And from what I understand, I mean, the guys like a challenge, so it's something they look forward to. But that's not just a saying. It really is a unique track and a unique experience for these drivers. Shifting over, we do a segment called the Florence Foodie's Favorite Florence Food Item. And we ask our guests, when they go out to eat locally, Florence County, Darlington County, what's one in particular, or maybe a couple of their favorite food items. So I'm going to ask you, Josh, you've been in the area for a while now, so you've probably made your way around a pretty good bit. When y'all go out to eat, what is one or two of your favorite local items?
Well, I will say first and foremost, the options we have in the PD region to get great food are phenomenal. I've been really impressed since we moved here. All the different places you can go, the different varieties. So I'm going to start right here in Darlington. I spend a lot of my days here during the day. So when I don't bring my lunch to go out to eat, we've got a lot of great places. But when I think about just kind of true Southern hospitality, south of Pearl, the lunch buffet is probably one of our favorites to go to. Makes it hard to make it through the afternoon sometimes when you go out of there, but some of the best fried chicken, some of the best home cooking. So right here, I really, really like south of Pearl. Our family lives in Florence, so we spend a good amount of our time getting out to different restaurants. And my kids love a good burger, so Buddy's Burgers is right there. But really, I think my favorite is Kyle Hardy and Tubbs Seafood and the shrimp po' boy there. I've eaten so many shrimp po' boys since I moved to town. So Kyle, keep it up. You're doing a great job, and those are some of our favorites when we're not here at the racetrack for race weekend. So
Miss Debbie let the cat out the bag this morning and told me that you might be quite the grill master yourself, though.
Well, so, you asked kind of earlier what my role is as track president. Well, one of those things is to make sure that our team is taken care of, that we support them. We provide opportunities to get together and celebrate our success. Get together and have a meal together. So about once a month we get together. Sometimes we'll order out. But then there's times where we've got a grill and we'll grill some chicken. Just last Friday, one of our other team members from Richmond was here, and he did some ribs, and we grilled some chicken. And so we just like to have a good time and eat a good meal together. And I think sometimes one of the things I love about our race weekends, especially throwback weekend, but we carry it forward to the Cookout Southern 500, is we have a throwback stand where we do some different throwback menu items here for our fans. So things like a fried bologna sandwich is one of my favorites. And then if you're up for it, I'd like to introduce you to our version of the PD dog.
I would love to see that.
All right. So we'll move over to the griddle. We'll get that thing put together, and you get to sample one of our fan favorites.
All right, Josh, so what do you got for us?
All right, so we're going to make the Darlington Raceway famous PD dog. So first thing we got a couple of all beef, 100% all beef hot dogs, about a quarter pound each. We're going to throw them right here on this hot griddle, get them a nice sear on them. And then the key component of this dish is your pimento cheese. We got Pawleys Island right here, pimento and cheese.
That's
so what we're going to do, we're going to get this all heated up. We're going to put it on the griddle, get it nice and crispy on the outside, get that little char. Then we're going to come back. We're going to top it with the pimento and cheese, and then we're going to grill that to create a nice crust right on top. So stand by.
All right.
Oh yeah, it's starting to look really good. So the next thing, like any good dish, you got to have a lot of butter.
That's right.
Butter's going to make it all better. So we're going to slap down some butter here on this griddle. Now we're going to take this pimento and cheese. Get our first dog. Put it in here. Pimento and cheese right on top of it. Big, nice helping. We're not going to skimp out on that.
You can have pimento cheese to about anything. And
Yeah, man, you get it grilled, get it hot, melt it a little bit, like we're about to do. Some of the best pimento cheese you find right here.
that is.
All right, so now got this butter all kind of hot. We're gonna throw these dogs right on top of it. Get a nice crust on it.
A lot of history in this building.
That's right, a lot of history. So, all right, Sammy, I think we're about ready to put these on a plate here. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah, look at that nice golden brown on that PD dog. Nothing like a little crust of cheese. So we'll let these cool off for a second, and then we'll come back and take a bite.
You're the first person to actually cook something for us.
All right, so maybe we started something.
So this is looking good. A lot of people don't know, like the crust in the cheese is a very slept-on technique. So I saw you doing that, and it's not always easy to execute either. But
well, I got to give kudos to our concessionaire partner Levy. Chef, came up with this recipe a couple of years ago, and I think it's been a perfect addition to our throwback menu. So let's dig in and see how we did.
all right.
Got our checkered flag napkin.
So you know what? Somebody's going to remember this. Talking about history in Florence. And I guess it's the brioche bun. I wasn't expecting this. There was a place, you wouldn't know this. There was a place called Kurt's German Delicatessen on Evans Street in Florence many moons ago. The building's not even there anymore. And he had these pigs in a blanket that we used to get on the way to school for $2. And they were a simple little item, but they were fantastic. And immediately, that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I love a good pig in a blanket. You get this savory of the cheese, that crunch. And you brought it up. You recognize the brioche bun I forgot to mention. That's a big key to it.
Absolutely.
Too. So kudos to Chef and our partners. You guys want to get your own PD dog, come out and join us for the Cookout Southern 500 Labor Day weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Tickets start at free for kids on Saturday, $10 on Sunday for kids. Tickets are still available. Got the Truck Series Racing, the Sober Slammer 200 on Saturday at noon, and then the Cookout Southern 500 75th anniversary, 6 p.m. on Sunday night. So we'd love to have you join us. And Sammy, thank you again for coming out. Let us showcase Darlington Raceway, our stock car museum, and share some of the history and tradition and some good food.
Yeah, no, thank you, Josh, for doing it. And I'm going to put links down in the description and the show notes where you can get tickets for the race. I definitely encourage, if you've never been, there's no event like the Southern 500, so try to make a plan to come out in August. Links will be down in the description. Josh, thank you again. And as always, we appreciate y'all's viewership, and God willing, we'll catch you on the next one.
Appreciate it. Thank you, man.